Our first speaker today has seen the potential already a few years ago. In fact, that's how I got to know him. I got to know him about 2.5, 3 years ago at the first Weltraumkongress in Berlin. And Thomas Jarzombek was actually one of the politicians on stage who already had a clue about what's happening in the new space back then. Thomas Jarzombek is the Economic Affairs Ministry's Commissioner for the Digital Industry and Startups. Further to this, he is the federal government coordinator of German aerospace policy. So basically, if you ask me, he's in the intersection in between startups and politics. So I'm really looking forward to his keynote right now. Please welcome with me, with a great round of applause, Thomas Jarzombek.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you all for having me here on the stage. And there's a lot of pressure on me, because when I came here, Peter and Clemens, who are the best networkers here in the region, I can say, and it's fantastic that you make it possible, again, here today, the Digital Demo Day. They said, so we don't want a political speech, we want you to make a pitch. I said, okay. And then Celine came to me and said, so we are so late in time, you have to speed up. So maybe I speak a little bit faster, but I don't know if that's the solution today. Okay, so what are we doing? The first pitch is, what's the government doing to support you as a startup? It's relatively easy. We put 4 billion euros into the startup ecosystem. We are doing a program, if you're starting from university, that's called Exist. We are doing a program for business angels to give them additionally 20% of grants. It's called the BAFA Investzuschuss. And we are investing in Hightech Gründerfonds, in Coparion, and SLPs in a lot of tech funds. Later this day, I've seen Klaus Hommels is on stage, and Klaus Fund, for instance, is one which we are supporting with government money. And the good thing about that is that we earn money, because we often always speak about taxes. And especially in the current election campaign, there is a lot of discussion about, can we rise taxes? I believe we need more innovative constructions. And if you look at Norway, for instance, or Singapore, you see that governments there are investing much more than the 4 billions we did. In Norway, they are investing 1,000 billion every year, and they made nearly 200 billions only in the year 2019. So we are earning money. And what's the conclusion out of that? We doubled it in this period. Right now we are investing 8 billion euros. We made additionally 2 billion euros as a support program for startups in Corona. And right now we are starting with our new 10 billion future fund. And if you look at the title, there's written it's a 30 million fund. And this is the reason we are investing 10 billion public money, but we only take minority in every investment, and the majority is by private money. And so in the end, it's a ratio of 2:1, and this will set free 30 billion euros. So money isn't everything, some of our startups are saying, and I believe talent is the second thing. We are pushing very much for ESOP. It's a big political debate about employer stock options, and I think we can get better. We got an improvement this period, but with the colleagues from the Department of Finance, it wasn't so easy, so we have to speed up there. The third thing is you need talent from overseas. And we made a new law that made it easier for you to bring people from outside of the European Union here to Europe, to Germany, to Düsseldorf, and to give them jobs even if they don't have a master in special fields. And the fourth thing I think is very relevant is to open up markets which are locked. And therefore, European Union is pushing right now with the Digital Markets Act. We started our national competition law 1.5 years ago as a digital competition law, and we want to give access for startups or for SMEs to the data of the big platforms. And right now, Bundeskartellamt is starting with that. So this is my pitch for what we are doing to support the startup business. The second thing today is space and new space. And I'm pretty proud that I have two meetings with astronauts. One is tomorrow with Matthias Maurer. He will be the next German European astronaut on the ISS, and we say farewell to him tomorrow in the morning, and then he will start to USA. But here in the room also is Susanna Ranelf. She will maybe be the one following, and I believe it's very important to see a female astronaut, and this is something we have in common. And it's a large process inside the European Space Agency to get women to space or to get people to space. And we said to them, we want you bring women to space as the next. And so she gave me this book here, and so I can say this rocket business is pretty easy. You can explain it to kids of 6, 7 years old. And as you might hear, I'm for some time the startup guy in the government and in the parliament. But in this period, also the minister Peter Altmaier came to the idea and said, you must be the one doing the space business. And in the beginning I said, okay, space, isn't that only a thing from large state agencies and old legacy industrial players, and so can this be a topic for me? And we found out that there's a very vibrant startup ecosystem. And it's not only a private initiative to get women to the ISS, it's also that you find a lot of data companies. All these satellites out there, they produce a lot of data. The ones that we set up from the European Union, the Copernicus network, is for Earth observation. I believe this is the biggest contribution of space to the humankind, that we deliver data about the atmosphere, about the temperature in oceans. We would know nothing about climate change without all these satellites measuring the planet. And all this data that is produced by the government satellites of the European Union is distributed as open data for everybody. And we see around a lot of startups. There is a guy from Düsseldorf he went to Berlin and started a startup, and now they are using space data, for instance, to identify for Deutsche Bahn. Every time in spring and in fall, you see there are storms coming and trees are falling down and trains cannot proceed. And what they are doing is to find out which trees and which forests are the most problematic ones for Deutsche Bahn to deliver a better service. So this is something that space can do. And it's a data business. We see platforms, Cloud.io, Up42, and you can start there right now, today, go online, look what kind of data is there and what can you do, what innovation can be built out of that. And I learned a second thing, and this was some kind of test bed, I believe, for the whole R&D system. Because if you think about space, most people first think about astronauts and rockets. And maybe you heard about Ariane. This is the European approach to go to space. It's a cooperation, especially with our French friends. And Ariane is a good launcher, but it's a very, very expensive one. But to be honest, 10 years ago, Ariane was the global market leader. And then something happened in United States. Yeah? NASA had a problem after space shuttle was too expensive, and they said we need a different strategy. Let's start a competition. We don't have to construct a rocket by ourselves. We can make a competition, and we say, so which startup and which corporate can build a new spaceship for us at which price point? And a lot of companies started, and maybe you heard of this guy Elon Musk, and so he had the idea of using a reusable rocket. And NASA said, okay, we support several projects. And in the end, he was the one, he was fastest, he was the best, and he gained a lot of tenders from the government. He became procurements from the government of around $10 billion. And with this investment of $10 billion, a small startup, SpaceX, got the global dominating company when it comes to rockets and to launcher technologies. So, and I thought for myself, so what can we do in Europe and in Germany to find an answer to that? Because obviously, Ariane is not the answer because it's so expensive. And then we tried to say, okay, this is best practice what NASA is doing. Let's try the same. And we started with a very tiny amount. In the last period of 3 years in ESA, Germany contributed 500 million euros for Ariane, and we took 500,000 euros for each of 3 startups that wanted to build a startup rocket. And the fascinating thing about that is that these 3 startups, they were so quick and so agile. And because we did a second thing, we said we will provide 500,000 euro, we make a technical qualification. That was very important because the VCs outside, they're interested to invest in deep tech. But rockets, quantum computing, eVTOLs, whatever. I guess nobody of these VCs really has a technical clue if that what the teams are doing can work or not. Is it only paperware, or do they have the technology? And so what we did with our DLR, the German NASA, was to make this qualification, and in the end we gave these 3 startups 500,000 euros and the approval that they are really capable of building these rockets. And what happened afterwards was that VCs, like, I can again say Klaus Hommels with Lakestar, it's the first time that Lakestar invested in a hardware company. Not only before they only invested in software. It's the first hardware investment they made ever. And right now, one of these startups, ESA Aerospace, they gained $150 million, 150 million euros of venture capital. And so there is no risk for taxpayers anymore. If we are going for Ariane, it's all the taxpayers' risk. These new space launchers, the only risk are 500,000 euros. That's all. And we give them procurements for the first 2 starts. That's again then 11 million, but therefore we can't bring satellites, for instance, from universities, students, scientific projects to space. And so I think this is a strategy that's a completely different approach than that what we have made until today when it came to the government research strategy. And I can ask the question to you, do you know a unicorn that came out of Fraunhofer? I couldn't find one until today. And if you look, for instance, when we look at best practice to the Technical University of Munich, they have a construction that's called Unternehmertum. They do something pretty similar to what I explained in the space sector, and ESA Aerospace was really coming from Munich and from Unternehmertum. And they built one unicorn after the other. And I think our job for the government in the next period will be to take the experience from this rocket competition and bring it to the whole R&D strategy. And this is not so easy because not everybody in the government loves the idea that you can also fail. It's a VC strategy. If you invest in rockets, in eVTOLs, in quantum computing, not everything will succeed. And I think we have to communicate in upfront to say, okay, this is completely new ground. We cannot give any kind of guarantee, but it's pretty sure if we don't invest in all these technologies, in the end we will become an industrial problem because nobody knows what will be the next driver, like the automotive industry for a lot of jobs here. So we have to try a lot of different technologies. And in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, we did a second thing afterwards with this success in mind. When it came to quantum computing, the government will spend 2 billion euros. We split it up, 1 billion for the Department of Research. They go the classic way from Fraunhofer to build a completely quantum computer. I have no idea when this thing will be ready, but the market is today as we can see it. IBM is selling already quantum computers. Google is heading to sell quantum computers. And what we did was to say, okay, let's make again a competition. Let's look for startups out there and let's provide them with procurements, with technology transfer, and with infrastructure, for instance, time on supercomputers. And that's what we are rolling out right now. We identified a minimum of 6 startups in quantum computing, which we will provide with procurements from the government. And I think this is what we need, a radical shift in terms of the R&D strategy of the public spendings. We have to leave the path to go only with one big consortium, only with the Fraunhofers. We have to go for competitions. And I think our people in the DLR, they are briefing this right now. And every new idea that comes up says, so we need a competition. And in the strategy also from Armin Laschet, there is an X-Prize strategy in it. He says, we want to make X-Prizes in Germany. sponsored by the government. We need competition in the scientific field. And so this is what I am pitching for, and I hope you're on my side, and thanks for having me here and for your time.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Great to have you here. Maybe you can answer us one last question. How often do you actually talk to startup founders within the new space sector?
To startup founders, I mean nearly every day,
Okay.
every week, I don't know, in new space. So it's a scene, sometimes you know everybody. It's not so big, but it's bigger than you might think. And so we meet on several times, and I can only encourage everybody to engage there. It's pretty easy. You don't need rocket science, just start with all this data.
And what's, from your point of view, the most promising startup right now in the new space sector?
Yes, I think ESA Aerospace is the one the most are looking at. It's the largest one, but also
ESA Aerospace?
ESA Aerospace, but also, for instance, Claudio and Up42, these platforms for providing the satellite data, I believe also very interesting. And we have further launcher companies, Rocket Factory, for instance, High Impulse.
If I read about something like Up42, I always feel like quitting my job and going into the new space sector. Don't you feel the same sometimes?
I don't hope that the voters will become this idea in 2 weeks, but maybe I will start a startup in October. Nobody knows.
Okay, then we wish you all the best luck, and thanks for coming today, and thanks for being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celine.
A big round of applause.